This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we take a look at some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 23rd of September, 2021, and I am DK.
I am Serbia.
And I am GW. In the headlines, in case you missed them, Daily Nation, Inner Circle, RUTO picks top brains for 2022. In the Standard, La Mada, RUTO's man to face trial. In the Star, Uhuru, DP war, dangerous, says Mudavadi. And in the People Daily, KEMSA bosses face jail over COVID-19 scam. DX, would you take us away?
Of course, always. So now, guys, I just wanted to ask a question. Simple. Some people were asking me to just ask the Kenyans of what happened to the newly elected MP for Kiambaa. Because according to gossip, they say that now the Kiambaa newly elected MP has been subjected to arranging chairs in Karen just to pay his political debt because he was sponsored during the campaign. Anyway, sorry, I just want to go today and talk about underdogs. And today, Gideon Moi was endorsed by more than 400 Kwale Kanu delegates for the 2022 presidential bid. And you know, sometimes we write down or we write off Gideon Moi, but the question here we want to ask today is that, are we missing something? This brings me to the thoughts that I had today. And at Fort Hall School of Government, we have submitted before that a runoff is inevitable in 2022. This is because no one candidate will achieve 50% plus one like Uhuru Kenyatta did in 2013 and in 2017.
True.
If this is true, then what will be the X factor in 2022? In my opinion, the X factor in 2022 will be the underdogs.
Tell us.
These are the rejected stones that will become the cornerstone of the post-Uhuru Kenyatta government. Let me explain. The Gideon Mois, the Kalonzos, Mudavadis and Wetangulas will form a critical part of who becomes president in 2022 through the runoff. Question is this good or is this good for country? In 2015, remember guys, during the State of Nation address, President Uhuru Kenyatta talked about the nationalist covenant. This is where all Kenyans, you and I, shared in one dream of unity as envisaged in our national anthem.
Correct.
Remember, in shock doctrine, Naomi Klein says that it is the ideas that are hanging around that offer solutions to crisis. And if the runoff will be the crisis in 2022, it will be the underdogs hanging around, the Mudavadis and the rest, that will offer solution to country when that time comes. Through the handshake, President Uhuru Kenyatta has invited us to form coalitions even with the underdogs for the sake of achieving the Kenyan dream of prosperity. RUTO celebrated the end of BBI like a month ago. Fair enough, give it to him, right? But I suggest that if the runoff will allow unity through coalitions, then the spirit of the handshake and the spirit of BBI will prevail by default, meaning that Uhuru Kenyatta will still win.
Oh, what a great submission. Serbia, could you take us away?
So, today we would like to write a memo to one Makawa Mutua, who penned an article regarding a so-called curse of the central political rift. By a curse, Makawa Mutua was referring to the political feuds between the Kikuyu versus Luo and the Kikuyu versus Kalenjin. The wording is unfortunate though, because who said it's a curse and who cursed them? Calling it a curse means it's a supernatural situation beyond human intervention. Such reasoning is pedestrian. I submit that these are just normal challenges that are characteristic of young democratic states like ours.
Yes.
And the fact that we have held it together this far, despite our ethnic divisions, show our tenacity and our common belief in Project Kenya. And this is why Kenya continues to be the anchor nation in East Africa despite our challenges. If we are talking about reconciliation, we should know that it has never been about the communities, but rather the individuals. The personalities were always the problem. Look at the historical issue of the Luo and Kikuyu that continues to be solved by the handshake. It was because the Luo thought the appointment were unfairly treated, from Jaramogi to Tom Mboya and Raila Odinga. But that aside, the handshake has given us a tremendous transformation in the country. Just look at the legacy projects. We are achieving milestones that we didn't even dream of 2-3 decades ago. In the article, Makau wa Mutua alleges that RUTO is trying to conquer Gema and reverse the curse. Well, only RUTO knows why he is at the foothills of Mount Kenya. But we can be certain that it has nothing to do with reconciliation. He's there solely for his own political convenience and selfish interests. He knows it is in his best interest to split Gema's 5.6 million and counting Kingmaker voting bloc. The Kalenjin and Kikuyu got together in 2013 to heal the toxic relations that existed since President Moi was in power. And all was good in the marriage until it was not. RUTO should have naturally inherited Uhuru, but fortunately, he showed his real hand too early and revealed who he really was. He effectively jeopardized the stable relationship between the two communities. He corrupted the reconciliation process by forcefully and disrespectfully entering Gema through the back door. The Jubilee handshake now resembles a 4-4 error message like a corrupted digital file. It is unfortunate because we are at a point in the country's history where a lot has gone into reconciling the Kikuyu and the Kalenjin. And we should not risk it all just because of one rogue character whose end is nigh. As I said earlier, we have observed the problem is never the communities, but rather the individuals.
Correct.
As RUTO has revealed in his vice presidency, he has no respect for authority. So I ask this question, who does RUTO answer to? Clearly nobody. And it is this lone rangerness that ends up being the larger issue facing our communities that Makau refers to.
The curse.
So to the Kalenjins, whom we know are a people who don't know how to be outside of government, I advise them to look for another kingpin. I advise them to consider who is representing them. They must remember that, after all, this is not a leader they unanimously chose. He imposed himself upon them. Also, President Moi told us, dead men could tell tales. And RUTO did this so he could enter Ikulu by any means necessary.
Hata kama ni mlango ya nyuma.
Period. Now, there's this famous adage. All hustlers are equal, but some are more equal than others. Today, I would like to tackle a certain political process and philosophy. Consensus in decision making. I'm drawn to this topic because the nation's headline states, in a circle, RUTO picks top brains for 2022. Now, consensus decision-making or consensus politics is where a group of individuals with different backgrounds in leadership, policy, and even economics come together to decide on proposals with the sole aim of acceptance by all. The main focus is on reaching an agreement from the majority in order to avoid useless opinions. However, we must remember that consensus only works when there is equality of opinion. Could this be missing from RUTO's list of cabinet hopefuls? Now, we suggest that RUTO has mastered the art of Sugoi consensus and blocking any other forms of dissent within his camp. We say this because he has surrounded himself with a list of characters that don't dare threaten nor challenge his opinions.
Exactly.
He is a lone wolf in a field of sheep, with advisors such as Ndi, whose train of thought is barely a stone's throw away from Mother Hospital. It's no surprise that RUTO has filled all positions of consensus with himself. RUTO has made himself the timekeeper, the note taker, and the facilitator all at once. Does this really sound like consensus or coercion? this man suffers from a very low style of leadership. He builds consensus by himself within a group that unanimously agrees with his course of action, even if no individual member of that group actually believes it. Why is that? Is he showing us how imperial his presidency may eventually look like? When other leaders have come to dialogue with other ethnic allies and blocs, such as the One Kenya Alliance, RUTO opted to go it alone. When BBI offered to include others in power sharing, he fought it vehemently. No vice president in the history of politics ever became president by asserting himself. You must charm your way to the power. No vice president has ever become president by selling himself a self-made politician.
Yes.
Whenever you look at a self-made politician, you are staring right at the horrors of unskilled labor. Every politician needs a mentor. More so, anyone seeking the presidency. So we ask the question, who is RUTO answerable to? Just like Serbia said. Abba Eban once told us, a consensus means that everyone agrees to say collectively what no one believes individually. All that begs to question, what do RUTO's cabinet hopefuls really believe individually? We submit that a RUTO-style consensus may eventually lift the veil on his rented cabinet hopefuls. Now, in the headlines, we have a three-part criteria that we use to judge. We ask ourselves three questions. Is the headline topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? Is it thoughtful or just plain lazy? Now, guys, what do we think about the headlines today?
In my opinion, all headlines were lazy. Nothing was insightful. But I loved slightly the whatever standard that tried to do.
Yes, with the
But I'm not
Lamada
particularly
fiasco.
in love with it, yes.
Yeah.
Not in love with it.
Me too, I choose the standard.
All right, so we have the standard as our winning headline.
So we post the rest.
Yes. What is our final thought for today?
And now our final thought, inspired by the book Mossad, The Greatest Missions of the Israeli Secret Service by Michael Barr and Nissim Mishal.
Okay, Serbek, would you give us your thoughts for today?
Before I start on today's book, I would want to give it context with a quote by a former Israeli president, Shimon Peres. He once said that Israel's hidden force is as formidable as its recognized physical strength. The unseen intelligence networks of powerful nations is our focus this week. And this is exactly what this book, Mossad, The Greatest Missions of Israeli Secret Service, encompasses. It gives us detailed inner workings of the Mossad, one of the world's most secretive and powerful intelligence agencies. The authors, Nissim Mishal and Michael Bar Zohar, capture 21 successful and unsuccessful operations of the Mossad. While looking also at the courageous acts of the Mossad, they also consider their failures and embarrassing moments. For the successful missions, the book gives narratives such as the Eichmann case, where Mossad agents tracked down the Nazi criminal Adolf Eichmann. It tells of how they captured him in Argentina and brought him to be tried in an Israeli court of law. They also narrate on other famous incidents like Black September, which was the Jordanian war, the complete wipeout of the Syrian nuclear facility, the assassination of the scientist Gerald Bull, who was developing a super gun for Saddam Hussein, and the missions of Israel's greatest spy Eli Cohen. Then there are the stories of slip-ups and tragedies. There is one on the killing of an innocent waiter, a Moroccan waiter, during Black September, whose only crime was that he resembled Ali Hassan Salameh, who was the Mossad's target. And then there is the tragic killing of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's older brother during Operation Entebbe. The book describes to us the great lengths the Mossad go to eliminate threats and protect their country. At the end of the day, whatever happens to their enemies is justified as long as Israel and its citizens are safe. This surmises what we know, that all is fair in love and war. This book gave me a deeper appreciation of the unseen or underground cogs that make the nation safe. The brave individuals dedicated to ensuring our freedom even at the cost of their own lives. So rather than blame such agencies agencies, if their duties cut across our freedoms or territories, we should make sure our own intelligence agencies in our own countries have the capacity to counter any threat.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
that's fantastic. You know, when you think about Israelis' situation, you must appreciate the fact that only the paranoid survive.
Of course.
Yes.
Our country is always being preyed on by enemies, so the intelligence service must be top-notch.
When you think about the best intelligence agencies in the world, whether it's MI6, whether it's a CIA, one name cannot be left out.
Or the DCI.
Or the DCI.
Yeah.
That is the Mossad. To understand why the Israeli intelligence has become one of the most revered worldwide, we must look at their track record. Even before the State of Israel was declared in 1948,
Yes.
the Jews had long formed organizations whose sole purpose was gaining intelligence on their enemies and their activities. The first motto that they adopted was from a biblical verse, Proverbs 24:6. For by stratagems you wage war. Their number one focus, gathering intelligence.
Yes.
Now, the chapter that really stood out to me is the one about Black September, or rather, the wrath of God. Now, the operation was coined Operation Wrath of God by the Prime Minister. Now, in Munich, 1972,
Yes.
millions of people around the world are ready to tune in to the 17th Olympic Games. Thousands of participants and supporters flocking the city to commemorate this event that unites all of us. Among them, 28 Israeli athletes full of pride, hope, optimism, ready for the Games. But the 5th of September 1972 will always be remembered for much darker scenes. On that fateful day, 8 heavily armed terrorists stormed the Israeli athletes' accommodation. For the first time in history, the world watched a live terrorist attack on broadcast. Just pause there for a moment. The whole world watching. Now, on this fateful day, 11 athletes were killed by the Palestinian terrorist outfit determined to rain down on the games and be seen by the whole world. The terrorists call themselves Black September. Now, the main goal of Mossad's operation was to exact revenge on the suspected individuals of the Munich massacre. The objective, locate and exterminate them expeditiously. One by one, the Mossad tracked down each and every suspect across different parts of Europe and killed them only in the few months after the Olympics. They even managed to stage decoy attacks against the Palestinian Liberation Group that birthed the same Black September terrorists. Their final mission was locating the Red Prince, also known as Salameh, the leader of the Munich suspects. Now, unfortunately, as Sebe said, there was one casualty who they had a case of mistaken identity. But the Mossad's team eliminated Salameh in Beirut with a car bomb placed along the route that he usually traversed to work and his usual day-to-days. Now, Israel's response was immediate and unwavering. Ask any war room commander and they'll tell you, we do not negotiate with terrorists. That was their position. Now, this quote by the 4th Prime Minister of Israel, Golda Meir, basically says it all. From the blood-drenched history of the Jewish nation, we learn that violence which begins with the murder of Jews ends with the spread of violence and danger to all people, in all nations. We have no choice but to strike at terrorist organizations wherever we can reach them. That is our obligation to ourselves and to peace.
Now, in my case, I think what struck me the most was what I found in chapter 4 of this book. And it is a story of a Soviet mole by the name of Zeev Avni, who could give up everything just to join the Mossad. However, his mission to infiltrate the Mossad was met by the intuitive genius of Isser Harel, who was a master spy and the head of Mossad in 1956. Now, he was born Wolf Goldstein in Latvia. Then he grew up in Switzerland, served in the Swiss army during the World War II, and later on relocated to Israel. After a couple of years, he changed his name from Wolf Goldstein to Zeev Avni. He joined the Israeli Foreign Affairs Ministry and was posted in Brussels, Belgium, and later to Belgrade, Yugoslavia, which is now in Serbia. Frequent informal collaboration with Mossad made him one of the contact guys in Europe. When in Belgrade, this guy, Avni, wrote several letters to head of Mossad in Tel Aviv, requesting that Mossad sets up a station in Yugoslavia. But this request was not accepted. Now, in 1956, Avni shows up in Israel on a private visit, and he requests to meet Isaac Harel, now the commander, or rather the head of the Mossad. And his request was given. Now, for your information, Isaac Harel, as described in the book, was a short, lean, balding man. But what stood the most out of him was that he was stubborn, he had brusque manners, and most important of all, he had fantastic intuition. So now Harel meets Avni after he requested to meet him, and asks him, hey, why are you in Israel? Then Avni replies, hey, no, I'm here to see my 8-year-old daughter who demanded that I come see her. And then Avni, as Avni was in the process of explaining his complex relationship with his family, this guy called Isaac Harel cuts him short like boom. Then he tells him, no, we are not going to have a mission in Belgrade. And the book says that this guy was shut down completely. He did not know what to do. Then he tells him, see, you know you want to join the Mossad. Now, according to, with regard to your future, we will see after your mission in Yugoslavia is complete. Now, this guy came with a mission to trick the head of Mossad. But now, due to his brusque, the brusque manners of this head of Mossad, he's cut abruptly. But now it doesn't end there. The head of Mossad gives him a private appointment in his office away from the Mossad headquarters in Tel Aviv. But then when this guy shows up in these private offices a week later, this short, balded man turns things upside down. He became a vicious lion. He clenched his fist like this. This is what I was reading. Then he starts banging the table and tells Avni, you are a spy. Confess, confess, confess. And now, because he was so stubborn, like a mule, Avni was thunderstruck. He was like, there's no way out of this. Man, this guy had to confess that indeed he was a Soviet mole who had come so close to what the Israeli call the sanctum of the sanctorum, the holiest of the holiest places, which is the Mossad. Now the book says that he was arrested and sentenced for 14 years in prison, but he was let go after 9 years in prison. He later became a psychologist, and then his life ended like that. But the question is, or rather the question is, back to the topic or to the point that I started with, how did this short guy who was stubborn, had brusque manners, and he had fantastic sense of intuition, how was he able to pin this guy with zero evidence? And the truth is, or the answer to that question is, the power of intuition. Which forms a good part of a good spy.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Gut feeling.
Yeah, man.
And on a day when we had a winning headlines from the Standard, remember to always keep it Fifth Estate TV. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and know we're on Pang Free to Air and Go TV. Thank you and have a good evening.
Good night.